Hey, this is Ryan Thompson from clovisstar.com. Also, I do BehindZionCurtain.com and a few others. But I wanted to do a get to know you and a personal testimony of my conversion, my faith in Jesus Christ. And it is important to me to tell people this. I am not a great evangelist. I'm not a great Christian. I'll lay that out for you. But I do want people to know what it means to me. And, it did definitely turn my life around. Um, and I'll tell you that I don't necessarily need it to be an afterlife experience for me to find the value in it. So when people I talk to on YouTube or in person, people at my work or people that I've known, from childhood who are still atheist or agnostic, and they talk about, well, you might be that you're scared of death. You want something in the afterlife, and that's why you found Jesus as your savior. And so, here it is for me. I was very agnostic. I was very against the church I was raised in, which was Mormon church, Latter-day Saints. I was baptized at age 8. It was very much against my will. My grandfather set me down against my will and cut my hair as I was kicking and screaming. I had long, rocker hair. I was listening to AC/DC and Ozzy and, Iron Maiden and stuff. Those were my favorites at the time, back in the 80s, back when this all took place. And because it was a cultural expectation, even though that my parents at the time were not involved in the Mormon church in any significant way, but they tried to fit in. They tried to, keep it all copacetic with the neighbors. So they, tried to present a good face for everybody. Meanwhile, they were smoking, drinking, gambling, taking, prescription drugs and whatever else, and not being very nice to their children in a lot of the cases. And I'm not just talking about me and my three, siblings from my mother and father, but, my dad's 5 children from his previous marriage as well were severely neglected by him. And a lot of it was due to his drinking. And, he's dead now. I'm not trying to spoil his reputation. It just is what it is. This is public record as well, anything I might have to say about him. So it's not slanderous. It's just what it is and how I grew up. So, I never took to Mormonism. And, when they baptized me, they had never gotten me to read the Book of Mormon or the Bible. I didn't know anything about it. So it wasn't a conversion of faith. It was a conversion of cultural expectation. And so I was officially a Mormon at age 8. And I went through life pretty much rebelling the whole time, or at least trying to leave home. My parents weren't really too, uh, stringent on appropriate behavior. And they really had no room to talk since my dad was in and out of jail. I learned later when he was on a business trip for several months that he was actually in prison for a felony for some sort of a fraud, a real estate investment thing. And, he was in and out of jail for drinking and driving and, other things. But the one big one was a prison sentence, or at least confinement. He was out of our lives for a good portion of a year when I was very young. So no, they really couldn't stop me, or at least hold moral authority over me for being who I wanted to be. My grandpa was a little more stringent in that, and he was able to have his way sometimes when we lived close to him. He was able to influence my parents in those ways to make me want, to make them want me to be more culturally appropriate in the Mormon culture. So I guess it wasn't really rebelling. It was just I was being who I was. Wasn't really keen on the drunken abuse of my father or the mental, you know, emotional manipulation of my mother. And I left home at age 12 when they separated once. I moved in with my grandmother, who was a wonderful Christian and had a Christian heart of charity and kindness, raised many of her grandchildren, because my grandmother's children, my aunts and uncles and my mother, weren't very, keen parents. They weren't very attentive parents. And so my grandma took in 2 of my cousins at an early age and adopted them, and then took me in when I was 12 for several years. And I was a mess. I'll admit it. I wasn't a very good kid, and she couldn't handle the fact that I refused to go to school, or that I'd stay up all night playing video games, or that I'd drink and party, at a very early age. So, I was at her house by age 15. I wrecked her car once. I was terrible. I'll admit it. And so, that's the thing is I've done this before, a long time ago. 17 years ago, I wrote my biography. You can read it at mystory.behindzioncurtain.com. And I'm not going to put annotations on this video because this is just raw. I'm just going to upload it without edits. But yeah, you can go to mystory.behindzioncurtain.com. Get a little more filler for what I'm trying to tell you about here if you're interested. But no, I've been talking about anonymous trolls coming to my YouTube and my social media, and not using any identity, and trying to incite emotions and negative conversation. And I've just dismissed them because, first of all, they won't even own their opinion. Anonymous trolls, people who are anonymous, who come and try to incite these emotional responses, I just don't have a lot of time for them. And I was trying to explain that, and someone's like, well, how do I really know who you are? Not as if though I don't use my name, face, identity in almost every way, website. I've had people come to my businesses. When I had a business, I used to broadcast from my vaporizer store, and before that, my trading post, and before that, my tech store. And, I've had YouTube viewers, fans, or, subscribers or whatever come and visit me at my store. And so, I'm not really a very elusive person. In my story, you'll see I've talked about my criminal record, and I've been very upfront and honest about all of that. I've got this one guy who is he's my wife's he's my wife's brother. She almost said she is my wife's brother. That's good Lord. A little tongue tied. It's been a long Christmas. We're here at our friend's house in Ireland. Great people that have been really kind to us, and let us stay here while we're recovering from the hurricane in Puerto Rico. But anyway, he came and he was like, well, you got your tattoos removed after you became a Christian, and you became a big phony, and blah, 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 and you won't own who you are. So, I talked about everything, like all the dirty details about my past, all the things I had to repent for, in my past, on my story, that, link that I just talked about at mystory.behindzioncurtain.com. All of that's there. But no, I got my tattoos removed while I was still very atheistic and agnostic, because they were poorly done. I've actually made a video showing all of the remnants. You can still see the tattoos. I don't know if you can see in this grainy video, but you can see the tattoos, on my body that I had when I was like 13, 14, and 15. They're still partly there because it was laser surgery. Laser surgery doesn't completely remove it. You still see the outline. You can still see, ink in your skin. It does a pretty good job, but it's not a permanent removal. It's not a complete removal. And it was poorly done. The fact is that I was embarrassed. I was 12, 13, 14, 15, giving myself tattoos before I ever had a tattoo artist tattoo on me that was in any way, shape, or form professional. And then my friend Eric tattooed on me with a homemade tattoo gun that he made out of, it was like a prison tattoo gun. He made it out of a cassette tape motor, a pencil, and a guitar needle. And he did a tattoo on the side of my head right here of a spider, which, I don't know, you can probably see it in my other video, but not on this. One on my chest, one on my back. I've got like a Zorlak skateboard tattoo logo on my back. And so this kid will say, oh, well, you've got all these Nazi tattoos that you had removed, and that's why you did it, because you didn't want anybody to know that. So first of all, no, I was never a Nazi. And second of all, I never had any Nazi tattoos. And, I guess the good and bad side of these tattoo removals is that, one, they're not there for, employers to see. You have to take a good hard look to see them. So I'm not going to, have people seeing all my crappy chicken scratch tattoos that I did on myself all those years, and, prejudge me for a job. That sucks, And I was 17 when I got them removed. And that's when when I left Utah. That was about the time that I completely left Utah and started hanging out on the coast, on the West Coast. But I still have them there. I mean, they're still there to see. But that's the benefit of it is that, anybody who could say that you had this, this, and this, but now you don't because of laser surgery, well, I still do have it. It's still on my body. Every single tattoo that I had, there's still a perfect outline of that tattoo on my body. The ink is faded, but it's still there, and the outline is still there from the scarring that the laser removal causes. And so, no, there was no Nazi tattoos. I had a family member who, in fact, I stayed with for a short time while I was a teenager. I was 15, and I lived at their house. They had a little apartment in Provo at BYU Housing. This is the local Mormon university housing, BYU, Brigham Young University. And they ended up getting a summer rental at a place in BYU Housing that I lived with them. I had a spare room that I rented from him for $200 a month. And he was, when I first met him, he was a Nazi, or he claimed this. He had like no Nazi friends. He was not like, in thick with anybody, except for his friend Steve, who I liked and, had a good time with. We, did drugs together. We did acid together, and we smoked a lot of weed together. Him, me, and Seth did, and my cousin as well. And that was it, as far as any friends in my life beyond that were racist or Nazi, there was none. I mean, there isn't one person in this world, friends, family, my mother, my sister, my best friends from school, from grade school, my friends from high school, none of them can point out anybody else besides my cousin's boyfriend, who's now her husband, that were Nazis or racist. I just didn't hang out with those kind of people. They weren't my kind. And when I was 17, I got a tattoo on my chest and my foot that says Spear. It's like a group that I wanted to coin as a skinhead group that was against racism. And Spear means skins and punks everywhere against racism. And I think that the Mormon church had a lot of influence on that kind of thing. And I probably had some racial tendencies because I told jokes that were, off-color jokes, and some of them semi-racist. Nothing any worse than what Eddie Murphy would tell. If you ever read or if you ever watched Eddie Murphy's Raw stand-up comedy, it was nothing more than that, really. And, it was funny, and it was humor. It wasn't, I wasn't trying to disparage anybody. And I don't think I'm positive I've never been racist to anybody. I've never picked on anybody because of their race or nationality or identity or anything like that, directly or indirectly. But no, I can dispel that. I didn't remove any tattoos after I found Christ at age 19. It was all before I found Christ that I got tattoos removed. It was because I was moving out of home and I was scared in life that I was going to be discriminated against. I wanted to have a good job and a good life, so I got my tattoos taken off me that were crappy, that I did myself, most of them. I had a little needle and thread. I'd wrap the thread around the end of it. I'd dip the needle into the ink, and I'd sit and tap on my skin and get some really crappy tattoos. Some of them, like I have a Dead Kennedys tattoo, were very anti-racist. You hear, Dead Kennedys, they sing a song called Fuck Off Nazi Punk. I got that when I was 13. So that's a little bit of my history before Christ. But then I was on the West Coast. I was in Spokane, Washington. Well, actually, first I went to Seattle. I met up with a group called New Horizons Ministries. Found a great volunteer that took me in as a family member. I lived with her for about 2 weeks, but she would come and mentor me at the ministry at the soup kitchen once a week. Her and her husband Leroy. It was Penny and Leroy Babbitt that I had this relationship with, and they prayed for me and loved me. I didn't find Christ immediately. It took me years, and I would travel around, and I'd come back to Seattle and travel around. I'd come back to Seattle. I went to Santa Cruz, California, Minneapolis, Minnesota, St. Paul, Minnesota, Idaho, Utah, back and forth, Arizona. And I'd always come back to Seattle, and they'd always be there, and they prayed for me. Anyway, and fast forward about, a year or two after first meeting them, I was in Spokane, Washington. I was in with a couple of guys, not a lot of friends. I just had a few, and one of them happened to be a drug dealer, and he had, he wasn't like a big guy or anything. He didn't have a lot of connections. He was just the local, punk kid that sold drugs. He wasn't even a punk kid. He was probably in his 40s at this point, but he had a little car, a little Audi that he let me borrow that I was going to pay him payments on and buy it from him for, a pretty good price, like $500. But I didn't have any money, so he just let me have it. And it didn't have a battery. I bought a battery for it. And I drove it down to the school where my girlfriend was and came back to where I got the car and parked it. Um, actually, in the first run I took, I got to and from with no problems. But the second time I went down, the car stalled, and I got off the road on a little ice embankment. It had bald tires, flat as can be. I mean, not flat, but they were just, they had no tread. They were just, bare rubber. And I flooded the car, and I couldn't get off this ice embankment, so it was dead after being flooded. And at this point, after all of my encounters with people talking about how Christ loves me, I was just like desperate. And I said this prayer, and I was like, God, if you are who they say you are, Jesus, if you are there for me, if you want to reveal yourself, now would be the time. Because at this point, I was just hopeless. I was on the verge of giving up, and I had warrants for my arrest in Utah for pot that I was running from. I had no license, no insurance. This was on a main road. This was Highway 2 in Spokane, and I just knew I was in, deep. I didn't know what else to do with myself. And I just asked for God's help. I said, if you could just pull me out of this, I'll give my life over to you. I don't know, where else to go or what else to do. I was desperate. I had nothing left in life. I was out of everything. No family, very few friends, no money, no future. I was just hard up in life, and I, fought everybody and everything. My whole life, I just fought and resisted, and got me nowhere. And especially religion, especially theist, especially anything like that. The closest I got to any God things was I had a family that I lived with that were Hindu for a while, and I had a family, friends and family, I guess, that were Wicca or Druid, and I've got some of those tattoos on me from those times in my life before Christ, before I found him. And anyway, the result of the prayer was that after I said it, 5 seconds later, I tried to start the car, and it started. And it was so flooded, it was so bad, like, I don't know how it started so quickly, but it did. And, even though I'd been, on and off this ice embankment and, trying to go back and forth and get off of it, I got myself in a worse and worse rut, but it got right out. I pulled right out of it. I made it home to this guy's house, parked the car, and it never started again. I went back like a couple days later to start it, never started again. I was just convinced that I didn't need it. It was something that was taken from me. The peace that was upon me after that prayer kind of convinced me that I was going to be all right. So I started hitchhiking again up Highway 2, and I found a guy who picked me up. His name was Nathan Rhodes. I haven't talked to him in years. He's on my Facebook, I think, but good guy. He mentored me for a long time, but he picked me up and was like, hey man, if you need a ride, or anything, I'm up and down this road all the time. I'm a pastor. It's like, wow, you're a pastor? That's crazy. I just said this prayer. I have a ton of questions about Christ. He's like, dude, I would love to answer those questions. He was a theologian. I mean, he really had a knack for it. He went to school for it, and he was a pastor. So, he was a young guy too. He was in his 20s, so he was a pretty young guy. And yeah, he answered a lot of my questions. We did a lot of coffee, coffee meetings and stuff. He'd pick me up, buy me coffee. We'd hang out. Good man, much better, much more patient than I am, I'll tell you. I'm less patient. I was then anyway, far less patient than he was. And so then I followed through with the promise I made to God to just change my life. And I found, scriptures like Romans 12, that all authority on earth are by God, that we should submit to the authorities as a reasonable service to God. And I turned myself in on the warrants that I had for pot. And, they gave me some options. And like when I turned myself in, they were like, oh, good. This guy's like repentive. He'll probably, be compliant and stuff. And they asked me, hey, you want to get out of jail free card? You can come work for us or whatever. You can help us with drug bust. And I was like, oh, dude, no, I'm good. I did the crime. I'll do the time. And I did a lot of time. I did 8 months. I was like 20 years old at the time, 21 maybe, and I did 8 months, 8.5 months in jail in 3 counties. I had 3 pot warrants, 2 tickets or 2 charges for each ticket, 3 different tickets. So total of 6 charges in 3 counties, and got work release on the last one up in Davis County. So I got to work for McDonald's, for 8 hours a day, and then I'd come back and forth between jail and work, and got some decent food out of jail. The jail food was terrible, but work release was good, and it gave me a step forward because I had a good reference after I got out of jail, that I'd worked for McDonald's. I was a good worker. I was steady. I was on time. I did a good job, every day, whatever. And I took that on, and my next job was a data analyst job for WMC, Western Management Center. WDC, Western Distribution Center. I worked for like Finger Hut and eToys and things like that as a data analyst for a season, and then after that I worked for Microsoft and so on. And it was, thank God for the tattoo removal, because I was working with very high level, clients doing a very intricate job, and I needed to be trustworthy. They would trust me with a large amount of data, a heavy amount of data, which was worth a lot of money if it was to get messed up. So if I was to mess up the inventory or something like that, it could be catastrophic. So it was good that I wasn't just some hoodlum coming in off the street with a bunch of tattoos all over my body. And so that worked to my benefit, but it definitely wasn't because of Christianity. It was way before that that I got them removed, but it just happened to help along the way, like I knew it would. And anyway, I wrote my biography. Like I said, I was very convinced that I needed to at least give repentive, story of my conversion and the ownership of all of my deeds and the things that I needed to repent for. And I sent it to all my family and friends, people that I had done wrong, people that were upset with me or whatever. I just sent this story along, confessing that, hey, yeah, I was a shithead. I'm going to try to be different. And I'm not going to say I've always been perfect since then. That would be a misnomer. There's no perfection in me. I make mistakes. I sin daily. God, and I swear like a sailor. So I'm not a great man. I wish I was. I wish I was better. I wish I was perfect like Christ. I wish that I had the patience of my mentor, my pastor friend Nate. I wish that there's a lot of things about me that I'm not always happy with. I'm sure everybody feels that way, but I'll tell you, I'm a lot happier than I was. I have a lot more hope. And that's what I was getting at first, is that, no, it's not even that I'm afraid of afterlife, I'm not afraid of, meeting my maker, or not having, or just being in oblivion or whatever, or going to hell or anything. It's not a fear factor for me, but Christ and his layout, his strategy, his plan, his mission on earth that I learned from was a message of hope. That even the lowest down people, the people with like the worst, the worst hope, the worst future, the worst situation, homeless or in prison. Paul the apostle was in prison, or all these things that I read in the Bible, and these people found hope in Christ because he loved them as they were, where they were, as they came to him, and was able to change their hearts. And so yeah, I feel like that was the message to me, is hope and love and kindness. And I don't know any other way to put it, but that message to me changed my life. And I was going in a very dark path before that, and I didn't trust people, and I didn't want anybody to be close to me. And Christ helped me open my heart. It was shortly after I found my wife as well. We've been together for 15 years. And, I had pretty shitty relationships before her. Whether I didn't trust the woman, or whether she didn't like, the commitment thing, that she was more free spirit, probably because of my lack of ability to be intimate. I was kind of standoffish or whatnot. It came down to me. I look back at past relationships and I see where I went wrong, and I could find little ways to pick and choose and say, oh well, it's because of this person and they did this or they did that, and in reality, it was just me. I was just broken. I was broken. I didn't trust. I had no hope, and I didn't have um, the ability to have relationships very well. With the relationship I found in Christ, I was able to develop trust and empathy, and I was able to fix a few things that I had broken inside of me. I talked a bit about my family. I don't talk to them now. When they So we were getting along great, and we had them in our lives for our first baby, and we lived next to them. We moved to the town I grew up in. I bought a house. I started a business, and I was doing pretty well. I was doing this ministry thing. I was trying to dissect Mormon doctrine, which was against my family's wishes, and my mom hated it because she didn't want to look bad in front of the neighbors. But it wasn't ever about her. It was about me trying to figure out what it was about Mormonism that hurt my heart to think about it. There was a lot of it, from racist doctrine to sexist doctrine to polygamy to ever-changing teachings to contradictory teachings to a lot of things. And I just wanted to, express what I found to friends of mine, people that I loved, and maybe help them out, because it helped me out to dissect that and to figure it all out. And so when I started that, it took a few years, but then my parents got religious. And it was in 2006, I believe, that they got sealed in the Mormon temple, or maybe it was 2007. It was like the year before my father died that they got sealed in the Mormon temple. So that means that they dedicated their lives to the Mormon church. They paid tithing every, month or whatever. They paid 10% of their annual salary. They do little tithing audits and stuff to make sure you're compliant, in order to have your temple recommend. They did all that. They got their temple recommend. They quit smoking. They were smoking in, 2005. By 2007, they had quit smoking. They had quit gambling. My dad was an avid gambler, was a passionate gambler. I don't know if he was addicted, but he was definitely prone to gamble whenever he got a chance. Quit all that. Went really good for him. He quit drinking years before that. He quit drinking. I must have been 15 or 16 when he quit drinking. I was well out of the house by then. It was the last time he got in a major car accident and was put in jail that I moved in with my grandma. I was 12 then. But he sobered up like a year or two later. Maybe it was a little longer than that. And after he quit drinking, God, he was the sweetest, funniest, most likable guy. Give you the shirt off of his back. Was kind, compassionate, empathetic. Even quit hunting. I think that was partially because he lost his gun rights because he had a felony for that real estate scam thing. I'm not sure what it was, but some kind of felony he got. So he made it like he was quitting hunting because he couldn't bring himself to kill a deer anymore. But I don't know if that's true. I think more of it was that he just couldn't own a gun, so he couldn't go hunting. He lost his rights to do that because of a felony, which again, this is public record, and it's not me just making stuff up. It's that this is what happened in my life, and my dad's dead now, so it doesn't hurt him, but it definitely is something I could prove. I know my mom doesn't like me talking about that kind of thing, but whatever. And one of his kids from his previous marriage accused him of molesting her. They wrote me these emails when Dad was dying, and I was trying to negotiate a relationship with my dad and them, and my mom rejected it. My mom was furious, didn't want them around, like the whole 30 years before that. And I was pretty troubled by that, because their dad, the only dad they've ever known, was dying, and he wasn't going to be around any longer, and they just wanted to say goodbye. And I guess one of the things that came out was that one of them accused the oldest one, who apparently has a different father genetically, but knew my dad as her only dad her whole life, had said that he had done something that I don't know if it was um, actual molestation, but that's what she claimed, and I don't know the extent of it, and I can't judge it because I wasn't there. I have no idea. I defended my father, said that he would never do anything like that. I don't believe he would, but who am I to know? I wasn't there. But just a lot of things that happened that I felt bad that I wasn't able to help and change and help the relationship mend. And that's all I wanted. I didn't know about the molestation thing until Dad died. Like he was a month away from dying. He'd lost his speech. He's totally wrecked from the cancer. He had brain cancer, and then that came out. I'm like, why would they say that when he can't even respond? When he's so broken and his body is not functioning. He can't even talk anymore. And they would bring that up, and that was just terrible that he couldn't even respond. But that was something that they passed around the family. I had two sisters telling me and my sister and everybody else. These are my half sisters saying, "Oh, your dad did this, your dad did that." So, but no. And after he was sober, because he was drinking when he was with their mother, and he was brutal, as I understand it. And when he was drinking, when he was with my mother, he kicked the living shit out of me. I thought he broke my ribs once when he was kicking me on the floor. So, I know, that, the alcohol was the worst influence on my father. And after he quit, he was so absolutely sweet and kind and empathetic and just an amazing man. And the drink is terrible. I wish people would not, especially if they can't handle it. I drink whiskey from time to time. I'm a whiskey fan. I don't drink much beer, and I don't drink often. I drink very rarely, but I can handle my alcohol. I don't think my wife's ever seen me drunk, like ever. Even if I drink a lot, like I handle my liquor really well. And some people just can't. Some people they have a genetic issue, a brain issue, something that affects them differently, and they turn into something different. They turn into a monster. And I've seen it all over the world. People, friends of mine, here in Ireland, I saw a young man who almost killed himself in a car, driving drunk, and just, if he would have had somebody with him, it would have probably been more tragic. He ended up not getting too harmed, but he launched his car like 250 feet through the air. It was messed up, and it's just some people can't control the drink, and I'm sure when they don't drink, they're probably like my dad, kind and wonderful and sweet and empathetic and whatever. But that was me. I did some drugs when I was a kid, and I turned into an asshole sometimes. I did some drugs that were pretty hard, and I just lost empathy. I'd say crass words. I would shout out things at my mother. She was brutal too. Mentally and emotionally, I think that it was difficult for me, and that's why I left home early. But when I left home, I got introduced to drugs, and I would shout verbal abuse at my mother and my father and my sister, and I just lost my patience with everybody. And that's the whole thing with me being able to have relationships now is because back then I wasn't able to. I was a different person on drugs and whatnot, and I'm glad that life is over for me. I'm glad that this new life is here. Could I have done it without Jesus? I think so, probably. I mean, I didn't do it without him. I tried. Like I said, I got my tattoos removed when I was 17, and I had focused on a better direction in life. I wanted to get out of, criminal activities, drugs and whatever, and I wanted to have a straight life. And I tried and tried and tried. It wasn't until I found Christ 4 or 5 years later that I was even able to, that I was ever able to handle that. And once I found hope and the compassion of Christ and the love of Christ, I was never able to do it. It was those things that changed my life. Whether you believe it or not, that was the tipping point for me. Now, I've seen people go through AA, and I congratulate these people. I have them on my Facebook, and they're always talking about their victories and whatnot. My dad did that. He went through AA. He did the 12 steps, and it helped him too. And these people don't always have the same higher power. Some of them have, this coin they give. They give these little coins. They'll mark that as their higher power. That's what got them through. That's their higher power, and that's what they focus on when they're going to drink or do drugs, and that helps them. They focus on that. They find hope in that, and so that's theirs. But I went through that, and it never helped me. I had to do it in jail a few times to get good time, to get released early, and I never did. I never did find that hope in AA and that strength that I found in Christ. And so, beyond all of the science on this side or the science on that side or the argument over here, we've been going through that on YouTube a bit lately. It's not even about that at all. For me, I found, even if, say, there is no creator, that this was all accidental, that there was, bunch of gases, a bunch of nothing in the universe, and they all eventually formed rocks, and then the rocks eventually formed amino acids, and then amino acids somehow made a cell, a cell membrane, and despite not having DNA, the membrane formed, and then DNA afterwards, or vice versa, or however we go through this, even if it's all natural, without any kind of influence of a designer or creator, still, no matter how I look at it, the hope and peace and strength and love of Christ changed my life, and I can't explain it any other way. And so for him, for his story, for that story I found in the Bible of Christ and his ministry, I am indebted, and I am a changed man because of it. Now, I have a common troll who will say, "Oh, but you were mean to me. Oh, you did this. Oh, you tried to evangelize me. Oh, and all this." And I can't even continue the conversation. So, because I took him on a job, he performed poorly, he got fired. I got him hired again, he performed poorly, he got fired. And he blamed me, and he cursed me, and he cussed me, and he, disparages me, and he contacts people that are on, my social media, or ex-girlfriends of mine or whatever. Shortly after meeting him, I totally stopped talking to him. And it's just because I was going through enough healing at that point in my life, and I'm still healing, that I didn't need somebody there to bring me down. I tried to raise him up. I tried to give him work. He was struggling. He needed work. My wife at the time, my girlfriend, she was my girlfriend, we were, fiance, begged me to take him on the job. I took him on the job. Worst mistake I made, because I would never do it again. It ruined me. So while I am still, while I feel healed in a lot of ways, and I found hope and love and compassion, I still am going through things that, make me weak, like this problem, dealing with people that are ungrateful and cruel and have no, empathy for other people. And so this guy will come and say, "Oh, you did this and you did that." So to put it in perspective, I met my wife in June of 2002, and then a month later, I took her brother on a job with me. No, 2 months later, I took her brother on a job with me. This would be in August. By September, I had told her that it's either him or me. She can marry me, or she can, have a relationship with him, but I can't have him in my life. So she had to make a choice. By October, we were married, and that was the end of that. So he doesn't have a long history with me. We cut him off instantly as soon as I, dealt with him in that job situation. And now he says he's got 15 years of history with me, and he comes to my YouTube channels, and we argue back and forth, and he's got all these accusations. Well, first of all, I've never called the cops on him. He's called the cops on me several times with fake accusations. Had his daddy come after me. We had a big fist fight, and his stepdaddy, all of this and all of that. But the history is that from the year 2002 forward, I have not had only but one conversation with him, one in 15 years. So we don't have a history. We had a month, where between the time I took him on a job and the time me and my wife got married, and then one conversation after that when his dad died, and I let him borrow some clothes of mine to to wear at the funeral, and he got flippy, and we had a big fight, and he wanted to hit me with a stick or something. And then later on, he sicked his stepdaddy on me after I called him out and said, "Hey, if you want to fight me, because he kept trolling me on social media and following me around and causing all this drama and contacting people that I know. And we had a little spat then where he wouldn't come down and fight me, so he sent his stepdaddy. He told his mommy that I was picking on him, and he sent his stepdaddy, and we had a little scuffle. And we both got charged with disorderly conduct. I beat the charges. The other guy pled guilty. Done deal. End of story. But that's lately I've had him coming to my channel again. 15 years we haven't had anything to do with him, and he still comes to my channel. And it used to be anonymous. It used to be him, but it was like him with no identity. He didn't have any content on YouTube of his own, and he would come and he would harass us. And now he's got content of his own. It's his voice. It's on his profile. He's got a 12-second video, and I know it's him. And so with that, I've responded back and forth on things, and it's all about, well, science is better than religion. Science is better than Jesus. I can prove this. I can prove that. So I've, tried to humor this back and forth and tried to be as respectful as possible. But, when it came down to it, after the daddy thing, when he called the cops on me and had his daddy come fight me, I looked up the guy's criminal record, and he'll say this is doxing him. This is doxing him. This is showing information that's, private. But, it's all public information. You can go to idcourts.us, www.idcourts.us, find this. And like the whole time he was harassing me and my wife and my family, threatening us, leaving us threatening phone calls, calling us out on social media, all this. We never called the police. We could have. We had a lot of proof that he was harassing us, whatever. But we never did. I just wanted him to do better in life. I was praying for him, hoping that he would find something that would change his direction in life. Well, anyway, after the cops were called, I looked up his criminal record, and his criminal record shows phone harassment twice, false accusations twice. He's accusing people of things, probably calling the police on them and telling them false things about these people. Excuse me. And then he's got, with the phone harassment, he got terroristic threats. And then he's got restraining orders, and he's got aggravated assault. He's got all these things. And this is in the 12-year time that I was dealing with all this with him after the job thing in 2002, all the way up till 2014, 2015. This was going on in his life with other people that I don't even know. I don't know these people. These are like ex-girlfriends and friends of his, or people that he's had conflicts with. It's just constant, he gets his feelings hurt, and then he follows him around for years, harassing him until he gets some criminal charges. So when he says that I'm this and I'm that, I'm horrible and I'm this and I'm that, blah, 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 and what about this and what about that? Well, if he's talking about 15 years ago, there's 9 guys that were on that crew that saw what happened. I've got 2 of them on my Facebook still that, know what happened. I mean, that's his word against mine, I guess. Whatever. Who cares? It was such a long time ago and such a minor thing. I mean, I practically got down on my hands and knees and begged for his job back because I was trying to impress his sister, who was my fiance. I wasn't trying to have a fight with her brother. That wasn't beneficial to me. He wanted a fight with me. I didn't want to fight with him. He would stay up all night. Why does God hate me? We're supposed to be to work at 5 in the morning for a 12-hour shift doing iron building, metal work. Iron work on a gun range, and 12 hours in the hot sun in Louisiana, and he's up in the middle of the night, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Why does God hate me? He knows I'm a Christian, right? So he's got these, questions in the middle of the night, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Dude, I don't know why God hates you. Maybe you should ask him. I'm going to sleep. I got to go to work at 5 in the morning. Shut the fuck up. And that's where he got his ass hurt on that. So sorry, but not sorry. You just got to get thicker skin, son. I don't know what else to do for you. But that's that. That's where this all comes from. But I wanted to, have an introductory and, a testimony of who I am, where I came from. And, people are probably wondering why on my YouTube this is all coming up, because I don't usually talk about creation and atheism and these topics, abiogenesis that have came up, things like that. It's not a big thing for me. I have faith for a different reason than some people do, and that some people think I have faith for. Even though my story's out there for everybody to read, like I said, at mystory.behindZionCurtain.com, that story is there. You can look at that in the description. I'll put that link in the description. That's my story. That's why I have faith. It has a lot more to do with a personal relationship with Jesus than it does with me picking and choosing science and studying biology and physics and all that. That's not where it came from for me. I was young and uneducated, but it was nonetheless an experience that did change my life in a significant way. And I have only one thing to credit that to, one relationship, one moment in life that changed the direction of where I was going, and that's Jesus Christ. So while all this other stuff is interesting to me, the science, the evolution, abiogenesis, intelligent design, creation, young earth, old earth, however, whatever, all that's interesting to me. But like I've said in previous videos, if I was to ever go back to school, that's not what I would study. I wouldn't study biology or physics or chemistry or any of that stuff. I read enough of it in my personal time. I'm interested in it. It's not my forte. It's not what I would enjoy doing for a living. A lot of these atheist people that study this stuff, they go into it so deeply, they're obsessed. They're almost like religious in their attempts to convert people, and they'll go to Christian churches, they'll go to Christian blogs or Christian YouTube channels, and they'll evangelize people. And they've got all this research and all this study behind them, but their one goal is to disprove God. That's it. It's not to prove evolution. It's not to further science. It's not to contribute to science. From what I see, most of these people have one underlying reason for their topic, and that's to disprove God. That's going to change everything for them. That's going to make them feel better. Okay, fine. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to disprove evolution. I'm not here to disprove this or that. I'm not here to change, the course of the world. But if my testimony helps somebody, if they see what I see, if it helps them, if they find hope or reason or, solitude in life because they connect with something I've seen or something I've taught, then fine, great, that'd be wonderful. And I'll go through some of these topics of science. I have a logical mind. I like to, think critically. I like to observe the evidence. But, you're wasting your time if you think that, all these things that I've already studied are going to change my mind if you present these things to me. Because I see a lot more evidence for God in those scientific notions and these, findings, like intelligent design, and you look and you find the details behind some of these scientific theories that are supposed to prove abiogenesis. Those kind of things all convince me of a creator. So far, I've not changed my mind on that. Maybe someday, if there's something new that is presented, maybe I will. But maybe at least it will change my mind on the abiogenesis theory or evolution. Probably wouldn't change my mind on a creator, because mine is a relationship thing. I have more proof that only I can prove to me. I can't prove to anybody else. But it was real enough to me that it would be very, very, very difficult to see around that. It wouldn't be easy for me to forget that, because it was so significant in my life. And the fruits were pretty powerful. So the other side of it, though, the whole scientific notions, some of those things, even if it doesn't match the Bible 100%, you got to look at it for what it is. Men wrote the Bible. Men interpreted God. Men interpreted the words of God, or the message they were given. And then they were trying to relay it to people who weren't scientists. They were laymen. They were, farmers or whatever. They were just simple people. So simple people got a complex message from a complex being and tried to relay it to simple people. And along the way, through word of mouth, things might have changed or been distorted. And so we see that there's probably some mishaps in the Bible or some incorrect notions, possibly. I'm not a Bible only guy. It's not the only source I look towards for information. However, you look at science, even in all of its advances for the last 3,500 years since the Bible was created, since the Old Testament was started up anyway, and, since Jesus, it's been 2,000 years, you see at least 2,000 years of advances in science and the scientific methods and the scientific tools and the way to look at things and all the knowledge that has been collected. And science is still wrong. Like you look at Albert Einstein's confusion on quantum physics and quantum mechanics. Like it blew his mind, totally turned his world upside down. He worked on it for like 15 years to try to find another explanation for these things and couldn't. So, science is still faulty and they get things wrong, and some of these theories are proven wrong and discarded in science, even with all of the modern advances of science. So how can we expect the Bible to be perfect if science is so far from perfect? These are men, even in the Bible, the people writing the Bible, they were just men, mortal men with flaws. And science is created by mortal men with flaws. So how can we expect different? I don't know. Maybe they think God penned the Bible? Well, he didn't. It was men who penned the Bible. And they probably got some things wrong. Or misunderstood things, didn't translate them correctly. Maybe the meanings are still there, but the translation is not correct. So that's why I look at many different books. I look at the Bhagavad Gita. I look at old Celtic wisdom. I've read D.J. Conway and Scott Cunningham and others, and I've checked out the Gnostic writings, the early Christians. They found these writings that are from the first century, first and second century, that are original manuscripts that they found of a group called the Gnostics that were Christians that have a different view than what the Romans had on Christ. And I rightly divide the words. It talks about in Thessalonians, rightly divide the word of God and hold fast to that which is true. Test and prove all things. Hold fast to what is true, what is good. And that's what I do. I try to weigh all the evidence, including the science, but also in these old religious texts. And I try to find the source and the meanings, and I try to put it all together in a way that, makes sense in the patterns that the world and the universe offers. If it lines up, then it lines up. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I try to decide based on that. And that's why I use multiple sources. I don't invest all of my energy in just one source. And I think that's a good way to look at it for everybody. Maybe it's not for you. Maybe Darwin will settle it for you. I don't know. But I suggest looking at all sources and weighing all the evidence and coming up with whatever it is that you come up with. And you do you, and I'll do me, and we can get along. Peace out.